For me, that starting point, the first visit of a space, and that conversation with the space is really important. I mean, I am then an abstract artist who works mainly with quite minimal shapes and forms and with color. Color is quite important, but for me, it's always that the space and what my response and the space which was already there, that whatever conversation, these two things start with each other. And that's for all the projects I will show today, kind of similar. I mean, I will then, when I go through the slides, just show you, just say very quickly what it is, because that would be otherwise too long. But I mean, we can have questions and things, probably in the afternoon as well about the project from here. As I said, the first project is in 1996 in. As part of East in the Sainsbury Centre in Norwich. At the same time, a project I did in Aachen in Germany in a kind of artist-run project space where I did very minimal colour placements or positions of geometric shapes responding to the space. I mean, with all of them, I think it is quite important that I don't see, and that is here as well, the work doesn't stop where the paint stops. It is the whole space, and is as well the engagement of the public or the viewer and what happens with that. So it very often, with a minimal intervention, basically addresses how we perceive and how we react to a space. That was a work called, the previous one was untitled. This had a title, Club Spa, and was in the museum in Bochum. And the chairs and the water and everything what was there was part of the intervention. It was bigger. I'm just showing that one slide showing two of the color interventions. One work I did in the Bunker Sztuki in Krakow, contextualizing or starting from that staircase. The work goes around the corner, but all the dimensions and the color were basically working with this kind of element of a space in between, where you have the exhibition space and then you enter a staircase which is more a functional space. That is an example in a private house where I did the whole color concept, a house with an enormous fantastic history. I can't go into that would take too long. Built in the 20s in Germany, and the owners had to leave Germany, had to emigrate, and then it went through a roller coaster, the building, and then it got bought by two art historians who renovated it and tried as well to open and make visible the history of the building, and invited me to do the color concept, and that is basically the drawing room where I left the ceiling with the original colors which I found and researched, I mean, what was there, but then I gave it a contemporary color scheme. Again, I'm showing only a few slides, not the whole building. That was a kind of spiritual space. They're both Zen Buddhists, and that was their meditation room. One work which was one of the first kind of bigger solo projects in the UK, which was the Mappin Open in Sheffield, in the Mappin Art Gallery, where the challenge was that they had, the exciting thing was for me architecturally that they had the old, I think, the Victorian building, and then a new build done, I think, in the 60s, and to do with very minimal color interventions, show how we actually see how we are influenced by the style of the architecture and the dimensions. That's then in the other. One work in a church in Dilston Grove, which is apparently the first concrete church in Britain, where I did a project where I designed for Gasworks Gallery in London a wall painting, completely fitting their space. But before I realized it there, it traveled kind of as a different arrangement, like a collage always of that wall painting, to different spaces like the church and to a few private spaces. And I was there interested again how color and an arrangement is changing according to the whatever social character of a space, and a bit like that fun aspect that it was a bit like collaging that idea of the painting into a different space. So that was obviously an enormous space where the color intervention was very small, or took little space of it. That was then in a flat of friends, and it was always the same amount and the same shapes, but just like if you imagine them as paper, given dimensions, then cut up. And in a different private space in Brixton, in a very nice Pullman Court, a very nice modernist estate. That is then the actual piece at Gasworks. That was a little bit later, my installation Forever Young at Chisenhale in London. A very simple way I wanted to show that kind of quite brutal architectural feeling of the space, quite empty. I work in Sunderland in the NGCA. It just shows the detail. The wall painting went through the whole space called Kaufhaus and was a reference to the first department store in my hometown, which was a brutalist building, and I was completely fascinated because they had this massive concrete building in a kind of baroque, the small market town. It was very controversial. I loved it. And they had a very dominant color scheme on all the floors. And I tried to remember these colors. I didn't research it, but I just tried to remember what was still in my head. A piece of in a group show in Bethnal Green in the pavilions called Under the Green Grass. Quite clearly, responding to that whatever architectural detail of the roof light. A piece in a show called Love, curated by David Risley, which was in the Victoria Mirror project space at the time, and he invited quite a few artists to respond to the space. I work with Platform for Art, Art on the Underground. Platform for Art? Yeah. With Tamsin, called All Day Long in Piccadilly Underground Station, which was up for a few months there. This is the only project I show which I didn't use paint, because there you couldn't use paint, but the material was given as these vinyls on the glass, but I used it. For me, it was very much a painterly project. That is one project of the few I've done over the years. A few projects outdoors, which is quite different a bit because you can't control the space in a way. The moment you work outside, you realize that there are so many factors one does not usually think of which influence the work. But here is one in Museum Goch in Germany, a very simple wall painting commission which goes around the corner of that museum. It's part of their sculpture garden. From where the photo is done is their sculpture garden, basically. That's a work of a garden at this wall, quite ugly wall of the garage of the neighbors, and they looked at that from their quite beautiful modernist bungalow, and then they said, "Oh, Lothar, can you do something?" And again, there, nature and color. It was something where you have to think a little bit different, or I think the influence of what's happening is different, and you can imagine. In autumn, this is becoming a different piece, or in winter, when it's an area where there's snow in winter than in summer. I work in the public art, in the public art context. I did quite a few interventions in social spaces. This is in with the Look Ahead Housing Trust in Bethnal Green, a house for ex-homeless people, where the whole social engagement and did workshops where there was a different work around the project as well. But one project I tremendously enjoyed because they gave me the possibility to do something without a compromise, but with with very much in close contact with the people who lived there. That was a project of a group show, part of a group show, Colors and Trips in Bregenz in the Palais Turner, Texas. There were 3 of these. They were quite quiet, nearly like meditation rooms in the basement. I'm only showing one image, so there were 3 of these similar shapes in 3 different rooms. One work, part of a group show, Murals at the Miro Foundation in Barcelona, where they invited people from all over the world, and as well and from very different cultural contexts, not all really particularly from a fine art context, but who have a mural practice, and to see how these different works come together in an exhibition. One work in a bunker in between Frankfurt and Cologne in Germany. It was a bunker where they found out, where the Americans stored atomic weapons during the time when they were based there. So the work I did from the color thing was a kind of response and comment to that. I work in Liverpool as part of the project Up in the Air there, where artists were invited to stay in a flat which was due to get demolished, and stayed there, had a residency, and did a project then as well in one of the flats, and that's called Waiting for a New Life. And I basically highlighted the space itself, all the things which I've put in, the furniture, the flower, and everything that was part of the work as well. But the main thing was the color intervention. Just 2 images. It was more rooms, it was a whole flat. One work at Hoxton in an old Victorian school. Wall painting in the Phoenix Kunsthallen in Sammlung Falkenberg, Collection Falkenberg, a private collector space in Hamburg. A piece in a private gallery in Zurich called, the other work was called Who's Afraid of Colors, a reference to the Barnett Newman piece, and that is a work which is based on Joseph and Annie Albers, and the title was Carnival with the Albers. I work as part of in 2011 I had a kind of, for the first time, a kind of retrospective with a museum in Germany. This was in Remscheid, and part of that I did 3 site-specific interventions in 3 rooms in that building, and they were all based on one character, Bernhard Landauer, from a book from Christopher Isherwood, Goodbye Berlin. The book, the novel on which the film Cabaret is based on. I can't talk for, there would be a lot to tell about that, because I sometimes do that. That work is kind of literally taken from a book or from a film or from a character. So these 3 rooms were dedicated to Bernhard Landauer. This is basically hall for Bernhard Landauer. This is playroom of Bernhard Landauer. And that was his bedroom. The rest of the show were paintings and drawings and other works over a period of 15 years. A wall painting in Wilhelmshaven called Flight to the North, again a work which was inspired by a novel from Klaus Mann. A work in Cardiff I think it was in 2012 or so. A chapter where I had a solo show, and that was the end piece called Circus. Again, a public art piece for Westminster College in London, done with modus operandi. Title was Fall, and it's a classic piece of responding to a new build architect. The architects were Schmidhammer Lassen, a Danish practice, and that's a college school. A staircase in the Kunsthaus, Kunstverein Hanover, one of these spaces which are a bit in between an exhibition space and a functional space. A wall painting in part of an exhibition called Black at a gallery, my gallery in Düsseldorf, at Petra Ring Gallery, and that had the title Cut. work in Gateshead at Workplace Gallery called The Ghost of the Bauhaus. Another mural based on the core block, that building, one of the Habitations from Le Corbusier in Berlin, but the title was Flatterallee 16 Berlin, but the show was in the Kunstverein in Wuppertal. I work at Platform A Gallery in Middlesbrough called Reflection as part of the show White Nights there, and as you can see, I work quite clearly taken some of the architectural details as a starting point. A different work, a kind of street art work nearly, I mean, for Art 14, an art fair at Olympia in London, where they commissioned whatever a wall painting, or a kind of, this is as well on wood, I mean on birch ply, similar to here, from the material, but it was only up for 3 days. It's a bit short. One wall painting at Domobal, my gallery in London, in a whatever the specific thing there is, of course, the kind of Georgian architecture of the building, and it was part. I mean, it's called "What Makes Boys Dance," and was part of the exhibition "The Line of Beauty." A piece with as well a kind of religious context. There was a show in Martha Herford in Herford. A group show called Visions, and they invited artists to do a work which is related to a vision. And what I did there was, that piece is called Vision of a Corner, is to imagine what that corner would be if it was a vision. Sounds a bit weird, but it was quite a striking building, a Frank Gehry building with curved walls, so technically very difficult to do the work. Another public art piece where I responded to an artist. I mean, so it was. I think this was one of the first times where I really had to respond as well or decided to respond to a piece of art. You see the floor. This is the main station in Wolfsburg, and the floor is a Daniel Buren, and they have this place called the Kunststation, where they invite artists to do. To play with these two walls, and I then responded, as you can see. I mean, to this, for me, the starting point was the floor piece by Daniel Buren. Another piece where I responded to an artist, there you can see the red sculpture. That's not for me, that's a Olaf Nicolai sculpture called The Flame, and then which was in this amazing room, which was white, and then the curator asked me if I could do something, respond to that, and I did this very simple color, basically nearly like a color curtain around the flame. And again, a piece there in the same museum, they had a very tiny or very narrow, very long, very narrow corridor where I decided to work a wall painting which actually you couldn't see because you would have needed a big distance. So I played with this with a perspective of just a few simple lines, and so I mean this is not showing it completely, but you lost a bit the perspective of the corridor. And one work which was a kind of like a walk-in painting in my show last year, the Kunsthalle in Memmingen, for emotional abstraction, which was as well a solo show where I had showed lots of different works and did 2 interventions. The one I'm not showing, but this was the room called Kaleidoscope, where basically all 4 walls were painted, and it was a kind of walk-in intervention. And the last image is from a work at the Whitechapel from last year, from the London Open, where I have chosen to do a wall painting at that threshold space again, where this is the wall where you enter the space, not really part of the gallery space yet, but kind of the entrance and that transition space from whatever ordinary, whatever normal life activity, going into the kind of more artificial space of a gallery, and that was called Connection. And yeah, I'm not showing an image of the work here because we can all go there and see it, which is much better, because one of the problems with showing all these works, I mean, all the images, is of course what gets lost is the physical the physical experience of a piece, which is for me very crucial and very important. And I think because for me the quality of the space, as I said, that makes basically me, or that is one of the most important aspects how I make decisions. And I always think these pieces we cannot only see with eyes. We can close the eyes. We will still see them. And I always think we see them as well with the body. And so that whole experience, what you perfectly can do here with the going into the chapel and what is happening there. And this is not that there are other senses as well. This is quite important part of the work, and that always gets lost in the images. So but you can experience it here.
Thank you very much.